It was supposed to be just another late-night interview, another polished smile, another charming anecdote. But when Tom Cruise walked onto Jimmy Kimmel's stage that night, something was off. The jokes cut deeper. The smiles were strained, and by the time the camera stopped rolling, Hollywood would be left reeling. What went wrong? And why did one of the world's most controlled stars finally lose his cool on live television? The applause was still fading when Tom Cruise stepped onto the stage, not sprinting, not beaming with that kinetic energy he was known for, but walking measured, precise, like a man who'd already calculated every angle of the room. He waved as expected. He smiled perfectly. But for this seasoned eye, or the uncommonly observant, there was something off. A flicker, a blink that lasted just a moment too long. His eyes swept across the audience but didn't land anywhere, as if he wasn't looking at people but through them. Jimmy Kimmel's voice rose above the noise, light and breezy, his signature tone of practiced duress. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the man who's done everything except age, Mr. Tom Cruise. The crowd cheered louder. Cruise reached the desk, shook Jimmy's hand, but even that handshake, firm but brief, lacked the usual grip and grin enthusiasm. Jimmy motioned toward the guest chair, and Tom sat, crossing his legs, his movements fluid but faintly mechanical. Tom, Jimmy began, leaning back with his cards. I gotta say, it's always exciting when you come on the show. You've got the energy of a guy who drinks gasoline for breakfast and does backflips just to brush his teeth. Laughter rippled. Cruise chuckled too, but the sound was clipped, like a button pressed for effect. He nodded slowly. I saw Jimmy jaw locked in a way that didn't match the smile on his face. I brush twice daily, Tom replied, the rhythm of his voice just a beat behind the usual cadence. But no flips this week. I'm conserving energy. Jimmy raised an eyebrow, playing along. But there was a sliver of confusion behind his eyes. He looked down at his notes, then back up, maybe trying to gauge if Cruise was just playing a new bit, or if something was actually off. You all right, man? Jimmy asked, with a smirk. Usually by now you've jumped on the desk and offered to fly the cameras around the studio. More laughter. But this time, Tom didn't laugh, just smiled, tight, unwavering. He adjusted the sleeve of his tailored jacket, eyes still on Jimmy. The kind of steady gaze that felt more like a scan than a stare. The overhead lights suddenly shifted to hot. Too white. A director in the booth signaled the tech team. Someone whispered behind the scenes. A camera operator panned wider, compensating for something unspoken but palpable in the room. Tom shifted slightly in his seat. His back remained straight, posture military, but his fingers tapped once against his knee before going still. Jimmy noticed. He leaned in, voice softening. Well, it's great to have you here. You're promoting Mission Impossible 8 now, right? Is it still called that, or are we just calling it Tom Cruise Almost Dies Again? The audience laughed on cue, but the timing was off. The energy in the room didn't quite match the material. Tom's response was measured. It's a story about risk, he said, about what it costs to keep doing what you believe in when everything around you keeps telling you to stop. Not the typical blockbuster plug. Jimmy blinked. He wasn't expecting that answer. Neither was the crowd, which settled into an awkward hush, unsure whether to applaud the seriousness or wait for a punchline. Well, Jimmy finally said, stretching the moment that got philosophical real fast. Tom didn't respond or smile. He looked at Jimmy the way a pilot might look at turbulence. Expected, annoying, but not surprising. The kind of look that says, I've been through worse, and I'm not impressed. Backstage, a producer leaned into another's ear. Something was off with Cruise. He was hitting every mark, saying all the right things, but the delivery flat. Too flat. Not robotic, but something stranger, like someone reciting a script they didn't believe anymore. The audience shifted in their seats. A murmur moved through the front rows. Phones stayed down, not out of respect, but caution. Instinctively, everyone understood this wasn't the usual performance. This wasn't charming Cruise, the ever-grinning daredevil. This was something colder, more calculated, like a man who'd arrived with a purpose he hadn't yet revealed. And Jimmy, ever the master of momentum, tried to push through. All right, we're just getting started, he said, laughing lightly. But even he could feel it, the chill in the room, the pressure building under those studio lights. Something was coming. No one could say what, but every camera was rolling. Jimmy shuffled the cue cards in his hand, a small theatrical flourish he'd done 1,000 times before. But this time, it felt almost like a delay tactic. The energy in the room hadn't rebounded, and the silence that followed Cruz's last answer still hung in the air like stale smoke. He glanced up at Tom, who was watching him with that same unreadable expression, still poised, faintly amused, or maybe just patient. Jimmy wasn't sure anymore. "So, Tom," he began, leaning forward slightly, his voice picking up its usual rhythm. "You've done some crazy stunts over the years skydiving, climbing skyscrapers, hanging off airplanes, but let me ask you something personal." Tom didn't blink. Jimmy grinned, eyes scanning the crowd for support before delivering the line. "I used to think you were an alien," he said, chuckling. "And honestly, I'm still not entirely convinced you're not, though maybe that has more to do with the religion you follow." There was laughter, not the full-bodied, carefree kind, more like a nervous ripple, the kind people produce when they're not quite sure they're allowed to laugh, but feel expected to. A few heads turned, a few eyebrows raised. Cruz smiled barely, his lips parted, teeth showing, but the muscles around his eyes didn't move. It was a practiced expression, sculpted and silent. His hand moved to the armrest of the chair, fingers curling around the edge like it was an anchor. He tilted his head ever so slightly toward Jimmy. The smile didn't fade, but it didn't grow either. Jimmy caught the shift, but didn't stop. Something about Cruz's stillness had triggered that old impulse. Poke the bear, see what happens. It wasn't malice. Not quite, more like curiosity sharpened into showmanship. "I mean," Jimmy continued, grin widening when you jumped on Oprah's couch and declared your love to the world. "Was that real emotion? Or was that just peak Cruz? Like a performance, so method-y you couldn't tell the difference?" Another wave of laughter, bigger this time, emboldened by the second jab. The crowd mistook Jimmy's tone for permission. Tom didn't laugh. His hands stayed clutched on the armrest. His posture didn't shift. But his eyes, those famous laser-focused eyes, fixed on Jimmy's face like they were measuring something. Not anger, not even disapproval, just an intense, unsettling kind of attention. The kind that made people fidget. "Because let's be honest," Jimmy added, riding the wave. "You've played so many characters at this point. Spy, pilot, assassin, prophet. You could tell us you're a time traveler from 2063, and I think half the country would believe you." The room laughed again. Jimmy smiled with a little too much satisfaction, leaning back as if to enjoy the moment. But the second he looked back at Tom, that satisfaction drained. Cruz was still smiling, still silent, but the air around him had shifted. It felt denser somehow, like he was choosing every breath, every blink with the deliberation of a man surrounded by landmines. "Do you believe that's funny?" Tom asked quietly. The words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. The room hushed immediately. Jimmy blinked, taken aback not by the words, but by the tone. Calm, icy, measured. It wasn't a question as much as a controlled detonation. "I mean, come on," Jimmy replied, trying to keep his voice light. "People joke about this stuff all the time. You know that." Tom nodded slowly. "They do," he said. "But you're not people. You're Jimmy Kimmel. And this isn't some late-night blog. This is your platform. Millions of people. Millions of impressions." The smile was gone now. "So when you make jokes about my beliefs or how I express emotion, it doesn't just reflect on me. It reflects on you. Your tone, your priorities." Jimmy shifted in his seat, trying to recalibrate. "Look, Tom, I'm just trying to have some fun here. We poke fun. That's what we do." "You poke at ideas," Tom said, his voice still level. "But this was personal, and you knew it." The silence returned, heavier this time. A few camera operators glanced toward the control booth. Producers gestured quietly behind the glass. There was a faint, almost imperceptible tension building at the edges of the frame, like a fault line waiting for pressure, Jimmy straightened up. Okay, he said, hands raised in mock surrender. Let's bring it back to the movie. Mission Impossible 8. You do all your own stunts again, right? Tom nodded, but the glint in his eyes had dulled. Whatever tension had flared a moment ago hadn't vanished. It had just gone underground, buried, not broken. I do, he said. Why? Jimmy asked it. Is it adrenaline? Perfectionism? Or are you still trying to prove something? Tom's gaze narrowed, not in hostility, but something closer to clarity. No, he said. I'm trying to remind myself who I am. Jimmy opened his mouth, but no words came. The audience was silent now. No laughter, no applause. Just the hum of the lights and the soft click of the cameras. Somewhere behind that silence, everyone could feel it. This wasn't the interview they were expecting. This wasn't the version of Tom Cruise they'd come to cheer for. This was something else, something uncomfortably real. The silence after Tom's words wasn't just awkward, it was loaded. The kind that makes even background crew hold their breath. On camera, it looked like a pause. In the studio, it felt like a shift. Jimmy blinked, adjusted his note cards again, his fingers slightly tighter this time. He knew the rhythm was off now, and worse, he didn't know how to reset it. Tom sat motionless, bike-straight expression, unreadable. The studio lights reflected in his eyes, giving them an unnatural gleam. A camera operator slowly pushed in for a tighter shot. That was when the audience saw it. Tom's right hand clenched the arm of the chair. Fingers curled so tightly the knuckles had gone white. His smile had disappeared completely. Jimmy cleared his throat and tried to recover. All right, he said, forcing a chuckle. Maybe that one was a little too close to home. Let's talk about the new film. Mission Impossible 8. You're doing another halo jump off a mountain this time. Tom turned his head slightly, like someone waking from a distant place. Norway, he said simply. Jimmy nodded. Right? Yeah, I saw the clip. You jumped out of a helicopter and basically free fell into a canyon. Normal Tuesday for you. A few people laughed out of habit more than amusement. Tom didn't. He glanced down at his hand, then released his grip on the chair, his fingers slowly uncurling, but the tension didn't leave his body. It just moved up into his shoulders, across his jaw. Jimmer leaned in, trying again. Look, Tom, I've got to ask, what drives you to keep doing this? I mean, most actors your age are doing rom-coms or playing retired cops. You're still out there hanging off cliffs. Why? Tom inhaled slowly. Because it matters, he said. Because when everything else feels like noise, this still feels real. Jimmy hesitated, unsure how to respond. Line didn't land like a soundbite. It wasn't crafted for promotion. It was something else, something raw. And the stunts, Jimmy said, shifting gears, are they about proving something to the audience? To yourself? To yourself? Tom's eyes didn't move from Jimmy's. No, he said, they're about commitment. About doing what I say? I'll do every single time. Jimmy smiled, awkwardly. That sounds exhausting. Tom didn't smile back. It's exhausting when you fake it. The room shifted again. A quiet descended, not dramatic, but definite. It wasn't the kind of silence that begged for laughter. It was the kind that made you sit still, made you listen. Jimmy tapped his cards against the desk, a subconscious fidget. Okay, he said with forced levity. Well, speaking of faking it, there's this viral meme of you smiling on red carpets. No matter what question you're asked, someone said, if you ever stop smiling, the world might actually end. The crowd chuckled again, looking to Tom for a cue, but Tom didn't laugh. He looked down at the desk, then back up at Jimmy. My smile isn't a mask, he said. It's a choice. That stopped Jimmy cold. It wasn't the words it was the way Tom said them. Not defensive, not proud, just settled, like someone who'd rehearsed them in private long before ever saying them out loud. Jimmy opened his mouth, but Tom continued. I don't smile because I'm always happy. I smile because I've learned that people don't listen to pain. They listened to performance. The audience was frozen now. You could hear the whir of the ceiling fans, the buzz from the stage lights. No one moved. No one dared. Jimmy adjusted in his seat. Tom, I think a lot of people would say you've had a pretty incredible life. Fame, success, global recognition. Some would say you're the luckiest guy in Hollywood. Tom tilted his head just a fraction. Luck has nothing to do with it. Jimmy raised an eyebrow. Then what does... Tom paused, and when he spoke, his voice was quieter than it had been all night. Discipline, focus, the willingness to be misunderstood. That last phrase hung in the air, unfamiliar in a setting built for easy laughs and applause signs. The audience didn't know what to do with it, and neither did Jimmy. For a second, the host looked like he might pivot, throw in another joke to soften the edge, but he didn't. Maybe he realized it wouldn't land, or maybe, just for a moment, he saw something in Cruz's eyes that told him to wait. The lights above the stage buzzed louder. A producer behind the camera made a slow slashing motion across their throat stall. The segment don't go to break yet. Jimmy leaned forward. You talk about being misunderstood. Do you think people don't get the real you? Tom's eyes sharpened. I think most people don't care to look past the version they're comfortable with. And what version is that? Tom didn't blink. The one that smiles on cue and never pushes back. Jimmy swallowed hard. There was no laugh track for this moment. No snappy comeback waiting. Just a tension that was slowly becoming the show itself. As the lights continued to blaze and the cameras rolled, everyone watching inside the studio and far beyond began to understand. This wasn't about a movie anymore. Jimmy shifted in his chair, sensing the weight in the room thickening with every word exchanged. He gave the camera a quick glance, one he'd done 1,000 times a cue that usually led to laughter, to applause, to rhythm. But tonight, the audience wasn't following. The rhythm had shattered, so he did what performers do when the script starts to crack. Let's lighten it up, he said, gesturing toward the big screen behind them. We actually have a clip I think the audience will appreciate. The lights dimmed slightly as the studio monitor flickered to life. What came on wasn't from the latest Mission Impossible trailer, or a behind-the-scenes stunt reel. It was a leaked audio recording familiar to anyone who had spent more than 5 minutes on the internet during the last 2 years. The moment, Tom Cruise's voice sharp and furious echoed through the studio. There were audible gasps from the audience. If I see you do it again, you're in gone. And if I see it again, you're in gone. It was Cruise on the set of Mission Impossible 7 berating crew members for violating COVID protocols. The full clip played, unedited, uncensored. His voice cut through the quiet like a blade. On screen, his anger had been shocking. Here, in the sterile silence of the studio, it was deafening. When the video ended, the room stayed silent, a few seconds too long. Then Jimmy, ever the host, smiled. Now that, he said with a chuckle, is what I call leadership. Huh. A few scattered laughs trickled out, awkward and unsure. Jimmy glanced at Tom, expecting maybe a shrug, maybe a wry smile. But Cruise wasn't smiling. He was standing, not abruptly, not dramatically. He just rose, slowly, deliberately. His face was calm, but his body held a stillness so precise it looked sculpted from stone. He thought that was funny. Tom said, voice low, controlled thought. Jimmy blinked. Mean. No. I just thought people should see what. Tom cut in, still calm, but sharper now. A man trying to protect his crew. A man doing everything in his power to make sure no one loses their job during a pandemic. Jimmy sat up straighter. Tom, it's just a clip. People were curious. It's out there. Tom took a step toward the desk. No, you didn't show it because people were curious. You showed it because you thought it would make good television. Because a man losing his temper, even for the right reasons, is good for ratings. Jimmy opened his mouth to interject, but Tom didn't stop. You weren't there, Jimmy. You weren't the one telling families they could keep their homes. You weren't the one responsible for hundreds of people praying that set didn't shut down again. I was. Jimmy let out a small laugh, but it didn't carry. Come on, Tom, Jimmy said. Eat happens. We've all had bad days. Tom's jaw tensed, and for the first time, his voice rose just slightly. That wasn't a bad day. That was a line. A line I drew because someone had to. The tension in the studio became tangible. The band had stopped fidgeting. The camera crew had gone still. Even the audience had ceased shifting in their seats. The laughter was gone. In its place was the unmistakable sense that something irreversible was unfolding. "You think I enjoy yelling at people?" Tom continued. "You think I want to be the guy who explodes on set? I hate that moment. But I'd do it again every single time because what we were doing mattered. And the second we start treating that kind of responsibility like it's a joke, we lose the right to tell stories at all." Jimmy leaned forward, trying to regain control. "Tom? You're preaching. This is a talk show." Tom stared at him, eyes locked. "No, Jimmy. This is a stage, and every stage comes with a choice. You can use it to uplift, or you can use it to undermine. You made your choice." Jimmy shifted defensively. "All right. So what? I'm the bad guy because I played a clip that you didn't like." "No," Tom said, his tone softening but not his gaze. "You're not the bad guy. You're just the guy who forgot what this is supposed to be." "What is it supposed to be?" Jimmy shot back. "Kroho. Jimmy shot back. A safe space for celebrities to feel special. An echo chamber." Tom's voice dropped again, whispering intensity returning. "No. It's supposed to be a place where truth and dignity can coexist with humor, where the person sitting across from you is more than just content." The lights above flickered faintly. Maybe a glitch, maybe symbolic. A producer in the control room silently gestured to go to commercial. The floor manager hesitated. No one moved. Jimmy rubbed his temple. "You're being too sensitive, man. People make mistakes. People laugh at things. It's human." Tom nodded once. "Yes, it is. And so is accountability." There it was, that word. Heavy. Final. The kind that rewrites the air in a room. "You're angry," Jimmy said. Now, fully aware this wasn't going his way. "No," Tom replied. "I'm disappointed. There's a difference." And we thought. He stepped back from the desk, looked out into the audience, not as a performer, but as someone painfully aware. They'd just become more real than the cameras were built to handle. The audience, to their credit, didn't cheer. They didn't clap. They just watched, instinctively understanding this wasn't entertainment anymore. This was reckoning. Jimmy leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly, like someone who had just realized the room was no longer under their control. His fingers tapped nervously on the desk, eyes darting toward the red camera light. The show was live. There was no pause button. No chance to regroup, cut to commercial, or rewind. The audience held its breath, but Jimmy wasn't ready to surrender the stage. He looked at Tom, still standing just feet from the desk. Poster immaculate gaze unwavering. There was no flinch, no flicker of uncertainty in Cruz's eyes. That same intensity, steady and quiet like a pilot locked on target. "You know, Tom," Jimmy said, voice tightening. "You've built this entire legacy on control. Perfect image, perfect stunts, perfect smile. But let's be honest, people don't come to see the real you. They come to see the myth. You're a legend because you've mastered illusion, not because you were ever real." Tom didn't blink. He stepped closer to the desk slowly, his shoes barely making a sound on the studio floor. The audience was frozen, caught between tension and awe. "I fly my own planes," Tom said. "I hang off the side of buildings, not because it's safe, but because it's honest. I feel every second of wind against my face. Failure. Wait. You feel risk. Every cut, every bruise, every drop of sweat is mine. That's not illusion. That's truth." Jimmy tried to laugh, but the sound came out hollow. "Come on, man." You think jumping off cliffs makes you more real than the rest of us? That's not truth. That's adrenaline and camera angles. Tom shook his head. It's commitment to something bigger than me. And the only camera angle I care about is the one that shows I was there present. Accountable while you hide behind punchlines. That struck deeper than Jimmy expected. He sat up straighter. Defensive now. Hiding? You think I'm hiding? I've sat at this desk for 20 years. Night after night. With politicians. Actors. People more powerful and more dangerous than you. And I faced them all. No, Tom said quietly. You joked at them. Not with them. At them. And you called it courage because no one ever pushed back. The words were delivered without heat, but the effect was nuclear. Jimmy's smirk faded. The audience wasn't laughing anymore. They were listening, leaning just a little closer. Jimmy opened his mouth, but before he could speak, Tom went on. You think because I believe in something bigger than myself, something you can't see, can't measure, can't mock, without feeling clever that I'm weak, gullible, or some kind of fanatic. Jimmy shifted. I think some people need religion to feel important, like the universe gives them purpose. Don't. Tom nodded, not in agreement, but in acknowledgement. That's your choice. But don't confuse detachment with wisdom. Not believing in anything doesn't make you smarter, Jimmy. It just makes you quieter inside. Jimmy leaned forward, his tone sharpening. I don't need to wrap myself in a church or a stunt harness to feel alive. I know who I am. Tom stepped closer until the edge of the host's desk was inches from his torso. Then tell me, Tom said. Who are you when the lights go out? When no one's laughing? When the cards are down and the audience is gone? Who are you then? Jimmy froze. Just for a beat. But in a moment like this, a beat is everything. I'm a guy who shows up, he said, every night. With flaws, with mistakes. But I don't pretend to be a hero. You don't pretend to be anything, Tom replied. That's the problem. You live behind that desk like it's armor, like it protects you from the weight of your own opinions. Jimmy's voice dropped. And you live behind a mask made of action scenes and Oscar campaigns. Tom leaned in, voice low and firm. The difference is, I wear my mask so I can take it off. You've worn yours for so long you don't even know it's there. Silence. Heavy. Real. The kind that doesn't wait to be broken. The studio lights felt hotter. The cameras zoomed in just enough to catch the sweat forming on Jimmy's brow. The audience didn't move. Jimmy stood slowly, almost without realizing it. Now, he and Cruz were eye to eye. It was subtle but unmistakable. Two men, no desk, no applause, just presence. You want to be respected. Tom? Jimmy? Ask it. Is that what this is about? You want me to bow to your discipline, your faith, your stunts. I don't want to be respected, Tom said. I demand it. Delin didn't he? Rise in volume. It didn't need to. The clarity in his voice made it ring louder than any yell. I've bled for this industry, Tom continued. I've risked my life. Not for ego, not for worship, but because I believe in the stories we tell. I believe they matter. And I, Tom continued, believe the people who make them every grip, every costume assistant, every background, extra day, deserve to know someone at the top cares enough to go all the way. And what about the people watching at home? Jimmy, ask it. You think they care how many bones you've broken? No, Tom said. But they care if the emotion is real. And I give it to them every time. Jimmy shook his head, eyes narrowing. You're so busy performing. You've forgotten how to be a person. Tom smiled. But this time it wasn't charming. It was tired, resigned. No, he said. I've spent my whole life learning how to be both a performer and a person. It's you who's forgotten how to be anything but a voice behind a desk. Jimmy stepped back, gripping the desk edge. Now, you think you're better than me? I think I've been honest about what I am, Tom replied. And I think you've been hiding behind sarcasm so long, you mistake it for identity. The audience was stunned. Not angry, not cheering, just stunned. Jimmy's lips parted, then closed again. He looked around, searching for a lifeline. A joke to break the tension. A producer to call it all off. But there was nothing, just cameras, lights, and Tom Cruise, unflinching in the eye of the storm. For the first time all night, Jimmy Kimmel had nothing to say. The silence stretched so long it began to feel like a third person in the room. Heavy, undeniable. Jimmy's lips moved like he wanted to speak, but nothing came. Tom stood there, calm, composed, but the weight in his posture had shifted. It wasn't the poised tension of someone ready for a fight anymore. It was the slow, aching gravity of a man who had nothing left to explain. He reached up and unclipped the small microphone from his collar. No sudden movement, no drama, just a quiet, final gesture. The sound of the clasp popping free seemed louder than it should have been. He placed the mic gently on the desk, right next to Jimmy's hand. "I think we're done here," he said, not looking away. Jimmy blinked. He hadn't moved from his standing position, but his face had changed. Less composed now, more raw. There was something in his eyes of regret. Maybe fatigue. He opened his mouth, trying again, words tumbling out too fast. "Who even needs you anymore?" He said it softly, but the words hit the studio like a slap. It wasn't just an insult, it was desperation, smallness, coming from a place Jimmy hadn't revealed until now. A place beneath the jokes, beneath the host. Tom paused mid-step, back half-turned to the desk. Foot just off the floor. He turned, slowly, calmly. No fire in his eyes, just disappointment. "You will," he said. Jimmy didn't understand. "Not right away," Tom added, brow furrowed. He took another step forward, facing him fully. His voice was quiet, but every word landed with precision. "You will understand very soon what it means to be unnecessary, to be replaceable, to look around and realize the room is full, but no one's looking at you." The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. Tom's tone wasn't angry. It was settled. That certainty hurt more than any volume ever could. The audience, unsure what else to do, began clapping. First, a few in the front row, nervous, uncertain, then louder, stronger. A wave of support washed across the studio, not for spectacle, but for stance. They weren't applauding a movie star. They were applauding a man who had stood his ground. Jimmy tried to laugh it off the way he always did, but the sound caught in his throat. He smiled, then stopped halfway. This wasn't that kind of moment. The rules had changed, and charm wouldn't fix it. Tom took a step back, eyes sweeping the crowd, then returning briefly to Jimmy. "You joke for a living," he said. "That's your craft. But you forgot something." Jimmy didn't ask what. "You forgot that even comedy has a cost, and tonight you cashed in someone else's dignity for a punchline." With that, Tom turned and began walking toward the exit. No rush, no flare, just the sound of his shoes tapping against the studio floor. The camera followed briefly until the director cut it mid-motion, unsure whether to let it roll or save face. As Tom neared the edge of the stage, he heard the applause building again, stronger this time, less conflicted. He didn't look back, but just as he reached the curtain, he stopped. He turned, slowly. Not for drama, not for effect, just for closure. He looked at Jimmy one last time, expression unreadable but not cold measured. "Finale, you asked, who needs me?" Tom said, voice carrying across the now silent studio. "You'll find out what it feels like when no one needs you, when they stop showing up, when the guests stop coming, when the laughter feels forced, the lights get hot, and the room feels too big. I don't wish that on you, Jimmy, but I won't stop it either." There was no applause, now just stillness, the kind of stillness that happens after something cracks and everyone knows it. Tom nodded once, not as a goodbye, but as a conclusion. Then, left. No one tried to stop him. The clip hit the internet before Tom had even left the parking lot. A shaky cell phone video from an audience member uploaded without filters or edits. 30 seconds of confrontation, 15 of silence, 10 words that would ripple across the industry. Within the hour, it was trending worldwide. Tom Cruise, Jimmy Kimmel Live. Comment sections split like tectonic plates. Some hailed Tom as a symbol of integrity, a man, finally saying what too many were afraid to. Others called it ego control, a meltdown in disguise. But everyone was talking. Articles multiplied. Think pieces appeared within minutes. Late-night hosts across networks hesitated, unsure whether to address it or pretend it hadn't happened. Inside the network offices, the mood wasn't conflicted. It was panicked. Advertisers began pulling spots for upcoming episodes. Publicists for major guests quietly rescheduled appearances. A-list actors and directors began distancing themselves from the show, not out of fear of Jimmy, but out of respect for what Tom had represented that night. Something had shifted. No one wanted to be on the wrong side of it. Meanwhile, Tom sat alone in a hotel suite, curtains drawn, phone face down beside him. He hadn't spoken since leaving the stage. His team tried cautiously to debrief him. He nodded politely, said thank you, and asked to be left alone for a while. Eventually, he picked up the phone. 2 tweets sat open on the screen. The first, from a film critic. Tom Cruise needs to remember he's an actor, not a philosopher. Save the speeches for the Oscars. The second, from a younger actress he had once mentored. What Tom did tonight took more courage than any stunt. That was a man standing up for every silent voice behind the camera. Tom read them both. He stared at the screen, neither reacting nor responding. Then slowly, almost gently, he locked the phone and placed it face down again. Outside, the city moved on. Cars, lights, people pretending everything was normal. But something wasn't. Not on sound stages, not in writer rooms, not in the quiet back halls of the studio where jokes are rehearsed and images polished. Something had cracked. From that fracture, a question spread. Quiet at first, then louder. Not just in Hollywood, but in living rooms, coffee shops, and classrooms. A question no one could quite answer. What does it mean to be real when everyone's always performing? In the echo of that night, the laughter hadn't disappeared, but it sounded different now. And maybe that was the beginning of something new, or maybe it was just the end of pretending not to notice.